Greetings, digital world. Welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced In Later. Jumping right back in with another episode twice in 1 week to make up for the fact that I buggered off for 4 weeks to gallivant all around America and have myself some fun. I hope you enjoyed the official coming back episode I dropped earlier this week, where we pretty much just raved about how good Werewolf by Night was, as part of our ongoing look into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And now we're back 3 days later to once again do that. It's the thing we do the most here on the show. We dive forwards and backwards into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whether it's going back to the early days and going through in chronological order, just talking about the early days of the MCU, the origins of Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, how they all came together, how everything branched off into sequels and TV series, brought in new characters. This very slow burn of a cinematic universe, which now I think a lot of people today can't remember a world without it. Aside from that, we review the new stuff, which after the pandemic closed, really took off in 2021 with the official launch of Disney Plus as well, meaning we've got 3 or 4 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies that come out a year, combining that with 4 or 5, what do we got this year? This is probably 3 or 4 this year. Disney Plus special TV series, which is another look into the world of the MCU, focusing either on side characters who hadn't had the limelight before, or as we've seen this year specifically, introducing new characters who I guess they decided would do better on a TV show format than a movie, which means we've done Moon Knight and Miss Marvel. And we're here today now to talk about the very, very recently completed TV show, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, starring Tatiana Maslany as Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk. And I do mean very recently. It only yesterday dropped on Disney Plus. Normally I would wait over the weekend, let the series process in my mind, think about whether it was good or bad, and then I'd give you my thoughts on my usual review episode drop time. But because I haven't been around for so long, I thought, why not get the ball rolling again with as many episodes as I possibly could do, meaning I don't really have time then to just stew and wait. I'll drop it now. But unlike Moon Knight and Miss Marvel, She-Hulk has had a run of 9 episodes, so it's been on for 9 consecutive weeks. Though the episodes haven't been as long, her being in my peripheral vision every week, delving into the She-Hulk world, means I've probably stewed on it more than I have the other stuff. So whatever. At the end of the day, I decide when I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about She-Hulk now. Before I get into it, I just want to clarify what people might be expecting me to talk about with talking about She-Hulk, a topic that came up very specifically during my review of Miss Marvel, but also has come up a bit with things like Jane Foster in Thor: Love and Thunder. The toxicness of the current fan base for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not everybody. As a whole, everybody's pretty great, and we're not up to the level of Star Wars. But we are starting to see a strong group that are pushing back against the MCU for a focus on female characters, and they hide behind the fact they do that thing where they say, I don't hate her because she's female, I hate her because of this. But if you feel the need to say that before you say it, maybe you do. I don't know. It's a tender topic. Everybody's really mad about this stuff. I just get very annoyed by it. However, She-Hulk as a show is able to respond to those people. It's pretty much a middle finger and a retrospective response to this current attitude that some people have regarding female characters in the MCU and female stories and all of that stuff as well. So for me to be redundant to then comment on this toxic fan base complaining about She-Hulk, even though She-Hulk knows that people are going to complain about it and are actively firing back at them, while being probably one of the most faithful adaptations of a Marvel comic book character and the way a character's story is told in the comics. She-Hulk specifically has a very unique way of telling her stories, not unlike Deadpool, in terms of breaking the fourth wall or calling out how absurd it is to live in a comic book world and deal with comic book characters and all of that stuff. So for me to go on and on about me being angry about people like that existing, it's a bit redundant because She-Hulk knows of them doesn't care, and is actively saying more against them than I could say it myself. However, I do want to say, if you haven't heard anything about She-Hulk except for that notorious 7 days where she twerked with Megan Thee Stallion in an episode, and Jesus Christ, the way some people reacted to that, that sort of stuff I hate. Twerking as an act is not considered sexual. It's how you respond to it. And if you're a grown 30-year-old man sitting in their room with all their Marvel posters behind you and all your little bobbleheads and all of that, making video after video after video on TikTok with the same image of Tatiana Maslany twerking and getting so angry about it, I can't really be mad at you. I'm just sad. I feel bad for you. Find something else to do with your life. Find a way to enjoy your life, because if someone twerking on a superhero show makes you that angry and that upset, something's wrong. Talk to somebody, get some help, because it's embarrassing for you as well as sad. So we won't be doing that. If you want to hear me complain about that sort of stuff, go check out my Miss Marvel review. I go full into detail about that. Instead, we're just going to talk about the show and how, for me, it is almost my favorite MCU TV show. Miss Marvel does just beat it out. But in terms of the style of the show, the performances by the cast in the show, the way the story unfolds, the presentation of the format, everything was very enjoyable to watch week after week and was unique to the MCU world as a whole. In the same way that Werewolf by Night is unique in exploring the horror and monster aspect of Marvel, She-Hulk is unique in basically telling a 30-minute sitcom comedy involving outlandish characters while commenting on the show as it's going on. And a show as well that operates on a week-by-week format. So it wasn't, apart from a few things that were hovering over the show as sort of arcs, for the most part, every episode of She-Hulk was a self-contained story. She-Hulk would encounter a problem, some situations would occur, and by the end of that episode, that particular storyline was wrapped up, and the next week we moved on to a different thing. And it was all the sitcom tropes you can get, the standard wedding episode, the self-crisis episode, the odd couple episode, the romantic fling episode, all of that. It's all in there, and it was all very entertaining. If you haven't seen She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, basically, it starts off as you would expect most of these MCU shows to begin. We follow Jennifer Walters, played by Tatiana Maslany, to a magnificent degree. She is the, as of before this moment, unknown cousin of Bruce Banner. She's a lawyer, and she's doing particularly well for herself, but then she's in a car accident with Bruce, accidentally gets his blood in her, which sounds gross, but there you go. And as a result, she then becomes a Hulk. But unlike Bruce, Jen is able to control her transformations. She can go back and forth between her Hulk persona without having to get really angry or lose control. Once people discover that she is indeed a Hulk, the rest of the show focuses on how being a Hulk impacts her life. The way she is branded as She-Hulk by the media, how they compare her to the Hulk, how they compare her against other superheroes, how it affects her job. She loses her initial job, but she gets hired by another law firm which deals exclusively in superhuman law. So cases involving people with powers, whether they're superheroes or not. Part of that job means she has to be transformed into She-Hulk while she's working. Her main drive is what starts in the beginning is Bruce is very adamant that now she has the power of a Hulk, she should be a superhero. But she is not at all interested in it. She wants nothing to do with being a superhero. She's not going to join the Avengers. She's not going to go out at night and fight crime. She certainly doesn't want a super suit. She just wants to be a lawyer and just succeed in her career, which, if there are any people out there who are listening who have studied to be lawyers, you can agree, it takes a very long time to get that degree and be qualified to be a lawyer. So just because you're now a Hulk, you're not going to throw all that away just so you can be a superhero? No, fuck that. As I said, there's an overarching plot involving a group called Intelligentsia and their very specific goal of trying to bring down Jen in some way or another. She is not actively pursuing that. She's not like someone's out to get me and I'm going to get it. It's just sort of little things that pop here and out. her overarching story in this show depends on what event she's dealing with in each episode. In the early ones, she's dealing with the fact that Emil Blonsky, the Abomination from The Incredible Hulk, wants her to represent him as his parole is coming up. Then she has to deal with some out-of-control sorcerers that Wong brings to her attention. She has to attend a wedding for her cousin, and that's where she thinks she should be She-Hulk, but she's told she shouldn't. She ends up at a retreat. She faces off against bloody Matt Murdock, the Daredevil, in court, and then they go on a little adventure together, culminating in a very She-Hulk style season finale, which I won't get into, but basically turns on its head any conventional ideas of how an MCU show should end, what you should expect, what you would think is the natural course for these sort of shows, completely shatters the fourth wall, basically breaks out of Disney Plus to have a real chat with the powers that be about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, what the future holds, and what She-Hulk's place is in it among all that. That's about it. I cannot recommend it enough. It is a wonderful watch. And now that all 9 episodes are up, if you were waiting for it to be done so you could binge watch it, now you can. Absolute positives here is this show is built on the shoulders of Tatiana Maslany as Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk. She is absolutely perfect in the role, and she's really good at portraying Jen as this wonderful protagonist, somebody who is hopelessly caught up in a lot of situations and does not want to be a part of it, somebody who has a lot of confidence, won't take shit from anybody who throws it at her, and also does really well at balancing that She-Hulk way of engaging in the story and then pivoting to break the fourth wall and talk to the audience. When it happened in the first episode, it took me by surprise, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to get on board with it. But by the end, I was like, this is absolutely perfect. I love it. I love the way she turns to us and says, well, this is a pretty bummer way to end the episode, or is this really how we're going to sell the show, as just one cheap MCU cameo after another? It was great. Not only is it a good reflection on She-Hulk comics and how they tell their stories, it's a good reflection on the absurdity of the MCU. Like, at this point, we've come a long way from Tony Stark putting on an Iron Man suit and flying around, and then the idea that he was going to hang out with Thor, the god of thunder, seemed ludicrous at that time. But here we are now, 14 years later, and we just got superheroes coming out the wazoo, whether it's in movies, on TV shows. They're all coexisting in this same world. They all run around New York and Los Angeles. So the idea that the world would still function normally is hard to grasp. But it's interesting to look at that, to go, if you were just someone who lived in this world with no powers at all, how would you cope? Would you get caught up in this stuff? Would you want to be a part of it? Would you want to pull away? That's all the stuff going on with She-Hulk. I love that her whole drive is not to be a superhero. It's just to get on with her life and get on with her job. I mean, cards on the table, you know that even though they push against it, She-Hulk's probably eventually going to show up in the movies and will most likely be standing there with the Avengers when they eventually all have to team up to defeat Kang the Conqueror in Avengers Secret Wars in Kang Dynasty that's coming in 4 to 5 years' time. But for this part, for this self-contained story, at this moment, I don't know if there's going to be a season 2, but the finale certainly seemed to hint that there would be, as well as dropping a few hints about potential movies and things that are coming up. When are we getting the X-Men? That is indeed the question. But for this self-contained story, it's a great story, and Tatiana Maslany absolutely kills it. I love the vibe of the show being a sitcom. I love the comedy. I love that each episode is only about 30 minutes. A problem with the other MCU shows was this belief that they need to be a long movie, meaning a lot of episodes were too long, and a lot of storylines were running out of steam, stretched over a 6-episode mark with each hour-long episode. So things like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and even Moon Knight to a certain degree, spun their wheels in the middle because they knew where they were going to go at the end of the show, but they weren't quite ready to get there yet. They still had all this content they had to fill. Each episode of She-Hulk is as long as it needs to be, whether it's just 30 minutes or 43 minutes or even 25 minutes. It does what it needs to do. It keeps everything moving along fast-paced. Nothing feels like it's added in there for filler or padding or anything like that, and we get out. And that's great. I really like that. It really is Tatiana Maslany's show. She has a good group of supporting characters and supporting cast, but they really come and go depending on how important they are to the story. Her one consistent side character is her best friend and legal aid, Nikki, played by Ginger Gonzaga. She's in every episode, and she's always there to bounce off Jen what she's going through, how she can help her or hinder her or anything like that. Aside from that, you've also got Pug, played by Josh Segarra, who's this dorky guy who comes in and helps her out every now and then, becomes like the third in a Harry, Ron, Hermione sort of friendship between the three. Jen's originally rival, but then ally at the firm, Mallory Book, a supervillain / social influencer called Titania, has some sort of beef with Jen that she really, really, really wants to keep going, even when Jen wants absolutely nothing to do with it. Followed by what I thought would just be gratuitous cameos, but MCU characters that show up in this show that actually contribute to the overall story that Jen goes through in this, whether it's Bruce helping her come to terms with her powers, whether Blonsky has turned over a new leaf or not, what Wong adds to his appearances on the show, and even Matt Murdock, who I will say I wish that they hadn't spoiled that in the original trailer for She-Hulk, that he was coming, because a lot of people every week were waiting for Matt to turn up. But when he finally did, one, it completely did not disappoint. Charlie Cox fell back into the role perfectly, and it got us all excited for two, the She-Hulk Daredevil pairing, which I never knew I wanted, but I'm glad I've got. Overall makes me very excited for this Daredevil show that's coming on Disney Plus eventually. Comedy's fantastic. Action is good when it needs to be, but it's very little of it in here. A lot of it is basically just Tatiana Maslany showing off her comedic skills, commenting on the absurdity of the MCU, and just rolling with whatever punches are thrown at her for that week. In that instant, it is very unique. It is definitely something that the MCU has never done before, with this sitcom style comedy show that comments on how just absolutely bananas the MCU is. But thanks to really engaging performance by Tatiana Maslany and really likable characters and likable story arcs, whether they're big or small, I had an absolute fun time watching this. And I think if you were to watch it now, not having to wait week by week, it'd probably be even better. Fantastic stuff. Gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I loved it from start to finish, and I think it's a really worthy addition to the MCU. It really proves that even at this point, there are avenues that this world can take to keep things fresh and new. Not everything has to be the exact same thing again and again and again. And I think recently with Werewolf by Night, with She-Hulk Attorney at Law, I think with the recent Miss Marvel as well, and what I hope with Black Panther Wakanda Forever coming out, is really showing the different levels that the MCU can be, whether it's really dark and serious, a little bit violent, a little bit scary, a little bit silly, but most of all, able to point at itself and laugh, which is something that I don't think a lot of other franchises can do. I don't think something like Star Wars or DC can step back and go, this whole thing we're doing is a bit silly. But Marvel, that's why it's the king. That's why it's holding the empire at the moment for film franchises and connected universes and all of that stuff. Great stuff. Loved She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Cannot recommend it enough. Tatiana Maslany rules. As I always knew she did. Check out Orphan Black if you haven't seen that. Theo, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed yet another look into the MCU. I promise my next episode won't be that. We will be covering ground I have already covered before, though. As I said, maybe before I left, even though I did an extensive look into each of the actors who played James Bond, my original plan was to finish that with a top 10, and I never ended up doing that, and I finished those episodes years ago. So quite recently, I have binge-watched through all the James Bond films so I can give you my definitive top 10 ranking, and I'm shocked but happy to say that there will be some surprises, I think. There's certainly changed up my original lineup for best films. Some films which I thought had aged poorly are actually better when looked at through different eyes, and some which I thought were initially very strong on a rewatch did not engage me as much as I thought they would. So it's going to be an interesting episode. So tune in next week for that, my top 10 James Bond movies. Otherwise, if you don't want to do that, wait a little bit longer and I'll give you a review of Black Adam, which I'll be watching next week. My first movie I've seen at the theaters in quite some time. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to reviewing it for you. And if I can get to the movie without being spoiled, that would be great, because Jesus Christ, social media, people learn to believe that just because you know something, you found something out about a movie, you don't need to tell everybody else because maybe everybody else doesn't want to know. I don't know. I cannot understand the drive that people have to know every single instant of a movie or TV show before they watch it. It completely eliminates the whole natural reaction of surprise. Anyway, that's a whole other thing that I'll get into when I review Black Adam. Just know that I've already been spoiled on something about it, and it shits me to no end. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next Spliced In Later. As always, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for listening to me. Each and every one of you rule, and I will catch you next time. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time. Again.